to, although it was only going to be for 7 games, a shared vision about what we wanted the seven games to look like, establish that together as a group of coaching staff and a group of players, and take it from there really. So I think the fundamental for us is that we've been together, we've been one group in terms of our goal, and try and turn that into performances on the pitch.
Based on what you've seen, the players you're working with, the quality in that squad, does it really surprise you, seeing up close and personal, just how poor Southampton have been this season?
Look, I think for me it's about, people are always going to have opinions on how a team's performed, whether it be supporters or whether it be the outside world. I think the big thing for me, and I'm sort of like quite steadfast about this, I think for me it's to assess the positives at the moment, and I wouldn't want to get drawn on being too cynical about what's happened previously, because one is, it wasn't my job, for the first part of the season. I come into the club as the under-21s coach to try and establish that pathway and implement that way of working for the players. So, and of course I get the interim spell with the 2 games, and then latterly step up and be in and around the first team, and now find myself in charge for the last set of games. So I wouldn't want to be drawn on what was poor, based on other people's assessments. For me it was about, right, where are we at now? What's the best thing for the players? What's the best thing for the staff? What's the best thing for the training ground? Let's be positive. Let's finish the season well. And by the end of my 7 games, or our 7 games, that we can hopefully talk about what was good, rather than what wasn't so good. So that's my aim, really.
I guess you've been probably asked this question every single press conference, every single pre and post match so far, but the points tally, 11 points, we know is equal to Derby's Counties, which is the worst in the Premier League. I know it's not something you're going to say day in, day out to the players, but how much of a personal target is that for you, that you do get those points on the board?
Yeah, well, we were behind it last week, and it's good that you pointed out on the positive front that we're now equal to it. So that was the first thing to achieve, a step forwards, and we've done that really well last week. And as I said last week, I'm not going to obsess about it. I don't think it's helpful. I can understand, my head's not in the sand around it, that, it's an important thing. And we want to pick up as many points, which obviously make that something that's not something we have to talk about. But at the minute, it's there. But really, it's noise. Again, if I keep drawing it back to how do we perform? It's not about what's the next best thing. Sometimes it's what's the intelligent thing to do next. And if I'm walking in every day and walking around with a dark cloud on my head about these, points and records that people will talk about, that can't be what defines us. It can't be what defines us. And again, as a group of people, a group of men that step foot on the pitch in our set of particular games, we've got to look at what do we want to define us. What are going to be the things that contribute to a good performance? What are going to be the things that connect us with our fans, who have been brilliant since I've took on the job. So they're the things that define us, and as a result, as a byproduct of them things, hopefully we take care of the points record, but I can't make it the main focus. I don't think that's useful, and it's actually negative energy, not positive energy, and that's what I'm going after at the minute.
Fulham next in the Premier League. What's the Southampton team news? Have you got any players coming back? Have you got any concerns over anyone?
No major concerns from last week. There was a few knocks and niggles, is normal stuff moving into this game, but again we've got a clean bill of health overall. So again, as I had last week, I've got a few decisions to make about what the starting lineup could look like, and equally the bench. Good problems to have. Probably the things that I'm learning as my spell as interim manager in the Premier League. They're probably the things that can keep you up at night. But that's the problem we want, and we're hopeful that when we turn up tomorrow and prepare for the game, I've got a healthy squad to choose from.
Fulham have been one of the best of the rest teams in the Premier League. They've been outstanding, and you've seen in recent performances and results, beating Spurs, beating Liverpool, who had been on an unbeaten run. You look at their performances, how effective and good they can be as a side. How big a challenge will this be, and perhaps maybe a real challenge that people don't expect?
Certainly not from our perspective. We know, that it's a real challenge. We know it's going to be a tough game, and when you are a team that's nearer the bottom to the top, most weeks you are going to view the game as, I don't want to say an underdog, but certainly we need to be spot on with our performance to get something out of the game, and maybe earn a little bit of luck along the way as well in these games. It's something where you need. We know that they've got qualities. We know they've got strengths. But again, we've got to find that right balance of preparing for our opponent and looking at the things that they think could pose us a problems, but not overly focusing on them, making sure there's enough of our preparation, which is solely about us, about the things we can do really well, the things we can control, and really that's what we've done. So yeah, tough game. I know they're fighting for a place in Europe still, and obviously one of my 2 games was against Fulham last time away from home, so I got a taste, up close and personal, if you like, about the game we're going into, which is really helpful for me. And it's one I think, as I said last week and before Aston Villa, it's one that we're looking forward to, that's for sure.
And in the Premier League, when you've been caretaker manager, the games have always been level at half time, which I think shows a sort of a quality to compete, to be there, to be in the match at half time. If you get to half time still in the game, then you're doing something right. Is that very much a part of your mantra, your philosophy, to be tight, to be defensively solid, to not give away cheap opportunities and be in the game halfway through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about growth. It's about finding ways to build yourself in these games. And as you've alluded to, we're playing against top level opposition every week in arguably the strongest football league in the world, arguably. So for us, where we're at the minute, looking at the situation, looking at the temperament of the group, looking at how we build confidence in these games, it's about growing into the game. And what this division has told us this year, that within any moment of the game it can be took away from you in some respects, with a moment of quality or extreme athleticism or a top level decision from a player within a game. So you do need to be spot on from that point of view. And absolutely right, if you're getting it at half time and you're at least level, that's a good place to be. It's a good starting platform.
And just finally from me, I know you're caretaker manager for the remainder of the season. We understand the club are drawing up a short list and getting closer to finding their head coach for the Championship next season. What have you been told about that process and their destination of getting closer to finding the man they believe that can take them straight back to the Premier League?
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing to say is the support from above me and around me has been top draw with Johannes, Mark and Phil. They've been really upfront and honest with what this is, and really just supporting me with the day-to-day part of the job. So I don't know too much about shortlists. I don't know too much about names. I don't know too much about that, because the professional thing for me to do, as I've said from day dot, is do the best thing for the group of players I'm working with, the people in the training ground, the staff, and most important of all, prepare the team as best I can for the supporters. And that is all my focus and attention is at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Cool.
Thank you. Leslie obviously got the point at the weekend. He hadn't had much of a look in before you took charge against Fulham. Can you think back and tell me what you saw in him first time?
Yeah, I think obviously Leslie is he's a young player. He's one of a pool of young players we've got. I know Leslie's on loan, so I think he's got great potential. Very athletic profile. He's perhaps finding his way in the game in terms of regular football in the Premier League. That takes time. That takes a bit of time to feel it out and, understand the new environment, to understand the players that you're working with on a intimate level on the grass, about finding out where you fit and what your role is. So I don't think it's necessarily that, us as a group of staff at the minute have unearthed something that people didn't see before. I think maybe, I'm picking up Leslie. He's a little bit further down the line in terms of his development within this football club. And what I've been able to do is hopefully, play a very small part in enhancing that in my time working with him.
How much of that development has been physical and fitness? Because it's only the third time I think he's completed 90 minutes in the Premier League, and 2 of those have been under you. And, well rewarded for that last weekend. Do you know why he was so regularly replaced after 75, 80?
Yeah, it's quite. I was just having a chat with a player before, and I think, probably based on my own experience as a player. In the lower leagues, the games were very thick and fast. In League Two or the Championship or League One, that, for large parts of the season, you're Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, Monday. I think in the Premier League, the first team games can be quite sparse at times with the international breaks, September, October, November, and gaining that match fitness and then quick flow of games, being ready to compete in the Premier League at first team level. There's not always the minutes available to get everyone up to speed. And it's the nature of the game now, so it's slightly different. And I find I would have found that a challenge as a player, to not have that 10 games on the spin where you really feel sharp. So what the players have got to be ready for now, and it's just where it is that, if you don't play for 2 or 3 weeks and you get your 20 minutes, you've got to be ready to take it, and maybe that he's benefited at the moment from that flow of games. And I'm sure every single club in the Premier League will have players that have that issue, have that problem of how do I build up match minutes and how do I get to the top of my game if I'm coming in and out the team. But that's just the nature of what it is now, I think. So maybe that's partly something of it. And now a flow of games, he's been able to build that confidence and build that understanding. But it's one thing for sure, I've been absolutely delighted with Leslie's contribution.
The fans couldn't have been more delighted in the away end on Saturday. I think a last minute equaliser like that is always going to get a good reaction, but it was telling, I think, how big the celebrations were. And living nearby, some Saints fans have told me that it wasn't even so much the moment, although there haven't been that many moments this season. It was also a feeling that they can feel a bit of hope for the future, that they're seeing something now. And I wondered how proud you are to have restored that so quickly.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to get carried away. We've got another game tomorrow, and your next game, as I said last week, is always your biggest, and about staying present. But having said that, I think when I sat here a few weeks ago, I spoke about in football stadiums. I think we can all think of some unbelievable moments we've had as children or as adults, as supporters, and moments. And I spoke about, I think I actually mentioned what it's like to get a last-minute winner or an equaliser. So for me, it was a really special moment to observe that. And I even had my own son in the away end, so I even looked at that and thought, that's a nice moment for him too. So I get to understand that, and I'm sure as the players do, they'll have family in that end, and they talk about it after, about what it felt like. And I think a massive thing is connection. It was a nice moment for the players to really authentically, and the fans authentically, connect with each other at the end. And again, it's not for us to. I don't think we can worry too much externally about what people were saying or aren't saying. I think it was a moment where we were one football club there. It was a group of players and a group of fans celebrating a really good moment, in spite of what's been a difficult season. So in terms of building momentum, where we want to go for the rest of this season, and more importantly, in reality, trying to get ready to bounce back straight away next season, I think it was a really good starting point, and certainly a nice one to observe for the players and the fans from my perspective.
Ask about another moment for you personally. You mentioned taking charge against Fulham early in the season. I know you've been around football all your life and managed many teams, but your first time leading out a team in the Premier League, how special a moment was that for you? Yeah,
it's incredibly honoured. Like everyone, you guys as well, you'll have sweat blood to have these moments in your career, and you remember your story. We all remember our story, the times of adversity, and everyone has that. That's not just football people. Everyone has that, and for sure, I've had my moments of reflection. Not many, got to say. I've been quite busy, but the moments I have been able to sit and reflect and think, about the journey to get here, however it's arrived, to managing the Premier League for this football club, and have the privilege. It's a privilege. It's a privilege, even as a manager. It's a privilege if you lose a game to be the one to get to speak to your players. It's a privilege to be able to have this voice in the media here. It's a privilege to be able to share my thoughts and feelings on whether it be the good times or the bad times that I'm experiencing in the short term. It's a privilege to lead the players. So, yeah, for sure, I've had my reflections around that, and every single moment that I'm able to stand there on the sideline, I do remind myself that, and as I'm sure everyone does, the journey to get there was arduous at times and long. And I think it's right for everyone to have their moments where they reflect upon that, and I'm certainly doing that in a minute. But there's a job to be done, and as much as I'm not here, just enjoying the ride. I believe in my abilities. I believe in my abilities as a coach and a manager. I believe in my track record. I believe in my experiences, and I'm finding that balance of enjoying it, but also, pushing myself.
You mentioned something to Mark just now about learning on the job. I can't remember quite what it was, but I'm sure there are plenty of very obvious similarities and differences between what you're doing now and managing non-league and under 21s and so on. What are the biggest things that have struck you as surprises or differences in this role?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have had a broad set of experiences. You're right, non-league player, football league player, host of injuries, always, having to find a way to bounce back in some way, shape or form. So in terms of, what the game looks like at the top, I worked Qatar 2022 World Cup with the England senior team. So in terms of exposure to the top level of the game, there's no real shocks to me. I guess really the intensity and maybe the post-match interviews might be something when you're tired and you're thinking in slightly different ways. But again, these are things that I feel trained for. So I wouldn't say there's been any massive shocks. And I draw it back to the process of, I've got a group of players in front of me. For me to add the right meaning to what's in front of me is not think too much about, global audience or what I might be saying right or what I might be saying wrong in the media. It's to go, right, what's authentic? I think the best performance comes from being yourself and being comfortable in your skin and being authentic. And I think the players need to see that from people they're working with. And I think everyone does. So as long as I feel I'm being the best version of me, the authentic version of me, and I'm keeping things about my processes of I've got a group of players here, how do I make them better? How do I understand them as well as I can? How do I help them perform as well as they can? Whether my experience has been, whether that's been under nines or whether that's been first team game in the Premier League, that hasn't really changed for me, and that's what I'm drawing upon at the minute, really, in honesty.
Good luck, mate.
Thank you.
How big was that moment? Let's simplify that 93rd minute volley, because you go in, you're telling the players things, you're trying to keep the squad together and get to the end of the season and be as positive as possible. But everybody needs a moment in your job when you take it to show everyone that you do know what you're talking about and you vindicate you and that sort of thing. You make your changes during the game, you get a late equaliser. How big was that for you?
Yeah, listen, I'd be a liar if I said it wasn't a big moment for me. But genuinely, I was absolutely delighted for the players. It's been tough for them this year, and again, even more so just to see the fans celebrating. So, yeah, it was a big moment. Again, look, it's fine margins in football. I know that, as I stand on the touchline against Aston Villa, against top level opposition, I'm well aware that, the tweaks you could change in the game, but I think the game's about players. There's a lot about coaches and managers on the side now. The game is the players' game. It's theirs to enjoy. It's theirs to enjoy. It's theirs to feel like they can express themselves in the right way, the responsible way. But, and you're always going to be able to make changes with your group of staff that you try and think influence the game. And sometimes they come off and sometimes they don't. 1 week you're a genius, the next week you're an idiot. And you're making decisions based on imperfect information in front of you because it's a human game. So there's not an exact science about making your changes. Some of it is informed information, some of it is intuition, and sometimes that goes for you, sometimes it doesn't. It went for us last week, and again, if it hit the post and come out, would these questions be the same? Who knows? That's the balance we're all sort of trying to work off, really. But yeah, in terms of feeling wise, it was an amazing moment, and I must say it was a draw. But I think what it represented for us all in that moment was more than a draw.
Yeah, and to see the players so genuinely thrilled with the fans like that was not only, for me, a great moment for the fans, but it just goes to show how much it means to players, because we just presume sometimes they go through the emotions, or some of them might be leaving or whatever. Yeah. But actually, as pure sportsmen, that was a great moment for them. And I want to know how that's translated since on the training ground this week, because confidence plays such a huge part in sport.
Yeah, it does, and that's right. I think for the belief, of course, it can make a big impact on what you're doing, and it's important to say that I likened that moment. I enjoyed it the most because at the start of the tenure, it was, whether you're a supporter or whether you're a player, you are a person, and you're a son, you're a dad, you're a brother, you're whatever you are to people that care about you first and foremost, and that's no matter who you are. And I thought for the players, the one thing whenever you take a situation on is I ask myself, can I leave this better than I found it? you know, and one of the areas was, can I leave the team's self-esteem better than I've currently found it? And that might come with results, and it might not, you know, but certainly them things that I think I can control and try and influence to the best of my ability is what I wanted to do, and I thought that was a great moment for that in particular.
Fulham then, you did really well when you set the team up at Craven Cottage, and you've already talked about how you can grow in games but need to make sure you're in the game to be able to grow in it. Does that philosophy then, and what you've learned, you said from the first game, just continue into this one? Because being harder to beat was always, for me, one of the biggest things they had to become as a squad. Yeah,
I mean, look, these are, again, it's what we want to be. I can talk a good game about it here, but there could be a moment of quality that goes against you early in the game tomorrow, and you have to live with it. So yeah, it's definitely, you know, being resolute and being compact, but also doing that so that it can bring our quality out. Because, you know, we can play. We have got good footballers within that team that can handle a football and can play and pass under pressure. So, you know, we can't go too extreme with that, but ultimately, I do think at the minute it has to be our priority. It has to be one of our priorities. And we train that, we talk about that, we have meetings about that, and we hope that if we get that bit right, it allows us to be in the game and then grow in confidence and have our quality moments ourselves, which I thought we had in abundance last week against West Ham.
You've already said a few weeks ago how the players, you've got no doubt about their character, their willingness to stay the course and not drop their heads and not give up because they're relegated. And I wanted to ask you about Kyle Walker-Peters, because he started more games than anyone else. He may well be, he's letting his contract go, he's disappearing in the summer. He's got every right to protect himself and worry about his future and everything else, injury-wise and so on. And yet there he is week in, week out, starting nearly every game and flying up and down the wing and doing his best. So I just wanted to see what you thought of him, because I think after 5 years at the club, his attitude is seemingly magnificent when you watch the pitch.
I think the best way I can describe Carl would be low maintenance, high performance. You know, and that's the dream as a coach, when you've got players who are low maintenance and high performance, and they're consistent with what that looks like. It's a nice place to be, and you know, on a personal level, I love working with him. And I think one of the things we're all searching for is, we all want match winners, and we want players that can entertain and excite. But then players that are consistent every week. You know what it's going to look like if you're in a bad moment in the game or great moment in the game. And I think, you know, Carl more than lives up to that. So, really enjoying working with him. And again, part of being a footballer is you do have to play with an element of risk, you know, and I know it's the Premier League we're talking about now, but I'm fairly certain if we went round the divisions, there'll be a lot of players playing without, you know, the assurance of contract offers in a couple of weeks. And that is part of it, you know, that is part of being a professional footballer, is you do put your body on the line. But overall, his attitude and application and to work with has been, you know, top draw.
And just finally from me, I remember Ruben Sellers giving up his assistant coaching role and taking the manager's job at Saints a couple of years ago. You've given up the under-21s and taken the first team coach's role in the interim role. Is that you? And obviously you've done that with the belief in yourself going forward. Whatever happens, you're an employable person in the football game. Has moments like last Saturday's late equaliser, does that make you think, I want a bit more of that? Or does it make you think, I'm happy to coach under 21s? Or do you want to now?
Probably will for a couple of weeks until it goes the other way. Then I want to go back to being a...
but how does it make you view your own future?
Look, I've for a long time, part of my role in clubs has to be lead groups of players. You know, sometimes being the 18s, the 21s, the 23s, the first team. You know, I've been a manager in my own right as well. So, you know, I'm really open-minded about what my career path is. But equally, you know, I'm ambitious for sure. But that ambition, you know, sometimes needs, you know, timing applied to it about when something's right and when it's not. So that's probably all I'm going to touch on that, because again, I really genuinely don't want to make this tenure about me. You know, I will get clear clarification when the job's done and when it's over about, you know, where the club want to take it. But I think for me to, you know, sort of like talk about where I want to take me, it wouldn't feel right to me at this moment in time, and I want to be really respectful to the football club and what my immediate role is.
Okay, we'll move on to 10:30.